Hello, everyone. This is Cheila Gibbs on Recipe for Success. I hope you're not listening, but if you are, please do spread the word. Today, I would like to welcome you, Codi. Tell me all about your background.
Well, I'm a pharmacist by trade and training. I still spend 7 out of every 14 nights working overnights at the hospital. I'm a pediatric pharmacist. I deal with everything from seizures to trauma to the cold or coronavirus. And so sort of on the front lines of the healthcare space, but I've always had a passion for the cannabis plant going back to my time in college, where, yes, I developed a relationship and had some fun times with the cannabis plant, but also as a pharmacy student was able to, well, whilst I was a pharmacy student outside of school, I made a cake for the dying relative of my girlfriend at the time. And this woman had requested, a brownie. I think we made her a vanilla angel food cake. And it was just a vanilla cake. I don't know why I said angel food. Take it back. The point was, is we made the cake. She tried it and she just had the most positive experience right in the last few days of her life. And before that day, she was struggling to stay awake with the help of morphine and lorazepam for pain and anxiety near the end of life. The day she took the cake, she didn't have any of these symptoms. She was happy. She called her children. And this had an immense impact on me and changed the way that I perceived cannabis as medicine. But I took that information and basically just put it in my back pocket because, as you know, cannabis and healthcare, and there's a lot of conflict, particularly in the UK, not a lot of acceptance. And I just sort of went with it and continue to have my relationship with the cannabis plant, but not professionally. And then in 2019, 2020, my employer announced a new reimbursement program where we could go back to school. And since my first degree cost me so much, I was like, oh, well, maybe I would consider it if it didn't cost me a fortune. And in that very same day, my buddy across the country, who I hadn't talked to in a couple weeks, calls me and says, hey, man, I'm driving down the road. I see a billboard. It says cannabis and pharmacy, new program, master's degree. I thought of you. And it was the same day that my employer had offered this new incentive. And that sort of nudged me over to rolling into the next part of my career, which is cannabis educator. Well, educator in general, but specifically focusing cannabis and psychedelics and teaching pharmacists specifically. So let's come back from the cannabinoids, THC and CBD. We'll get there and talk about cannabis sativa L, technically, which is the order of plant. It is the scientific name of the plant we're talking about that makes these cannabinoids is cannabis sativa L. Now, that is the scientific name. I know you heard sativa in there, so don't get too confused. We're going to set the indica sativa talk to the side. Okay. Cannabis is one type of plant. It's one family of plants. Now, there are a lot of different varieties. You've heard of them before, like they've got the funny names. But those are all, even whether it's classified in the dispensary as indica sativa, which again is sort of controversial. But setting that aside, this is all still one type of plant. And one species of plant. They have all these different varieties. The same way that if you look at a rose can come in orange, it can come in yellow, it can come in blue. Those are all the same plant. They're just different genotypes, not very dissimilar than the color of our skin or the color of our eyes, right? But we're all Homo sapiens, but we have these different features. So there's a lot of genetic variability in the cannabis plant. And so it can actually do a lot of things. It can look a lot of different ways. It can be purple, it can be orange, it can be pink. It has all these different abilities to look differently, even though it's one type of plant. And that's just looking. It turns out underneath the surface, when we look at a chemical level, these, again, the same species of plant, cannabis sativa, that we've currently separated into two general categories, marijuana and hemp, based on the chemicals they produce. But that is an arbitrary distinction. These are the same plant. They just have different genetics. that leads to
Mm-hmm.
different production of the psychoactive molecules. Those
Okay.
psychoactive molecules produced by the cannabis plant are known as cannabinoids. So the
Mm-hmm.
category of chemicals that is produced here. Now, those are technically plant-derived cannabinoids. These cannabinoids are mimicking things that we already have in our body. That humans and our ancient relatives, whether it's primates going all the way back to mammals, rodents, all these animals have a system inside of us known as the endocannabinoid system, right? So cannabis
Yeah.
cannabinoids known as phytocannabinoids, but inside of humans we have an endocannabinoid system. Endo meaning
Yes.
inside. And so we
Yes.
produce from the fats within our body molecules that create balance in the body to help us respond to feeling cold or feeling too hot, to help us respond to anxiety or to pain. The body produces endocannabinoids to regulate things. The cannabis plant, as it evolved, learned how to
Yeah.
make phytocannabinoids, plant cannabinoids that can interact with this system. It can
Mm-hmm.
hijack it or enhance it, interact with that system. So it's really kind of cool that we have this system inside of us, and the cannabis plant has figured out a way to produce them. And it's the cannabis plant doesn't just produce THC. There's a multitude of cannabinoids, 6, 8, 10 that are should be mentioned here, that cannabis can produce that do have activity in the human body.
Like what?
Well, an example would be the one that everyone thinks of is THC. And THC has actually
THC.
quite powerful effects on our endocannabinoid system, right? As you may have heard in
Mm-hmm.
your previous podcast, binding to the CB1 receptor, again, sort of the
Mm-hmm.
satellite dishes of our endocannabinoid systems. THC comes in, swoops in, interacts, and it creates all of the things that you associate with being high. So maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
feeling good, maybe it's giggling, maybe it's pounding a lot of food, maybe it's really red eyes, maybe it's being forgetful. All of those are, we'll call it side effects, the effect of THC interacting with our endocannabinoid system. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
most notable example of cannabinoids that we have. It's the reason the system got its name. We found THC
Mm-hmm.
interacted with the system, so we called it the cannabinoid. But that's really,
Got it.
where the direct connection stops. Your body, in the absence of THC and in the presence of dietary fats, has a healthy, functional, well, not necessarily healthy, but has a endocannabinoid system, and it's something that's irrefutable. It's ubiquitous in all life on planet Earth, and that's pretty damn cool. Cannabis makes
Mm-hmm.
THC. It interacts with this. So in humans, it creates all of the effects that I just described. But do you know what happens if you give a large dose of THC to your dog?
No.
Yeah, they experience a very stereotypical side effect. They might have nausea, they might shiver, and they might get really sleepy. But one thing that's very stereotypical is there's so many receptors, cannabinoid receptors in a certain part of their brain that helps them move their legs, that the dogs are no
Okay.
longer able to walk. It's if a dog
Oh.
takes overdoses or takes too much THC, not deadly usually, they often have the inability to walk for several hours, if not longer.
So we spoke about THC. So what is the difference then of so THC pretty much makes you high? Am I right saying that?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but it is almost unavoidable that it will also make you high. It has pain relieving
Good.
properties. It has affects your immune system. It affects your mood. Lots of those things, and it can
Yeah.
have beneficial and negative effects depending on dose, frequency, and your genetic predisposition.
Got it. And CBD?
Yeah, CBD is a really interesting molecule because if you look at THC and CBD next to each other on paper, they're technically very, at least on paper, 2 dimensions, not 3 dimensions, very similar looking. But actually, if you look at the structures closely, and if you understand chemical structures, there's a one big difference is THC is made out of three rings sort of in a row. That tricyclic structure is very rigid. It doesn't want to bend, right? Kind of like these three fingers. You couldn't really twist it.
Uh-huh.
But CBD is two rings and it's sort of separated in the middle. So a ring over here,
Uh-huh.
ring one, ring two, and it's here. And it can spin and
Got
twist around. As opposed to THC, it's sort of stuck in this three ring position. And as
got it.
such, even though it's made out of the exact same stuff, the same number of carbons, the same number of hydrogens, and the same number of oxygens, they have a drastically different pharmacology. And that bendy
Uh-huh.
nature of CBD, it leads to it not interacting with the CB1 receptor at all like THC. In fact, not much at all.
Uh-huh.
And therefore CBD doesn't give you high. It's probably not going to decrease your um your core body temperature. It's not going to do all of those classical dry mouth, dry eyes, hungry effects that THC has, because even though it's
Uh-huh.
their isomers are made of the same stuff, they're arranged just enough differently to have very different effects.
But CBD, we see now, it's not a lot, but you can see in little shops, couple of shops, if you have pain on your bones or, um, and now something big is menopausal symptoms like mood swings and night sweats. Yeah. And they seem to, I mean, they do not cure, but they seem to at least help to maneuver while you're going through these symptoms. Do you agree with that? Do you think is that a good solution, or
Well,
is
I
this just a myth?
yeah, I mean, I think you acknowledged the truth is that this isn't the solution, but I do believe that cannabinoids, both CBD and THC, might have a role to play in helping women, or sorry, excuse me, helping women manage the signs and symptoms of both perimenopause and then obviously menopause
Menopause,
after
yeah.
that. So, um, we obviously need more research. I cannot definitively say, and we probably never will. This woman should get this dose of this specific drug, and
Yes.
this woman, because of her age or genetics, that she should get this. So we don't really have all that tight data, but we have a lot of data, including surveys of women that say, "Hey, I'm using cannabis to help manage my menopause and perimenopausal symptoms, and it's helping." And I'm here to tell you that
Mm-hmm.
pharmacologically, this makes sense. And one of the major reasons is because of the dynamic and important nature of the endocannabinoid system. And then once again, you've kind of got two tools that we've talked about here: is THC and CBD, and they have different places potentially.
Mm-hmm. But how do you know the dosage? As a doctor or as a nurse, as anyone, how can I, as a woman, come to you and say, I have hot flashes, have night sweats, or whatever it might be? How can you prescribe and tell me what to take or how much to take? How do I know what my dosage is?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the you know, $1 million questions. I think that's the expression. I might have messed it up a little, but yeah, I think there's a lot of interest in this. In Western medicine, we often like to try to put people into sort of standard boxes so that we can kind of better aggregate data and we can kind of try to get a better lay of the land. But that's sort of just a starting point, usually in medicine anyway. I can tell you as a healthcare professional, we titrate
Mm-hmm.
to the effect we're looking for, avoiding side effects, particularly major ones. But there aren't hard rules. It's more or less just ends up being a little bit of guidance. These
Mm-hmm.
pharmaceuticals go under much more rigorous study, and it gives us a better starting point than cannabis. So because of that, we start even lower with cannabinoids, and we titrate up and
Yeah.
we consider individual patient factors. Individuals who are not taking other medications can take really large doses of CBD safely. But if you're on other medications, prescription medications, a large
Yeah.
dose, which I'm talking hundreds of milligrams, is probably something you want to like strongly consider and think about what your medicines are and what the risks associated with they are, because CBD can change the way that our body metabolizes other drugs at larger doses. So
Oh,
we want to we have to look at the whole patient in order to say that. But when it
okay.
comes to cannabis, there is no known starting dose. That's why we always use the adage start low, go slow. And I've heard some experts even put an appendage on that. And don't be afraid to go all the way, because we do know that
But
these molecules are generally quite safe.
but isn't there any side effects you think, or?
Well, we would have to be specific about which substances we're talking about. In the case of cannabinoids, THC, CBD, I would expect very few side effects. We know that cannabinoids have been tolerated at quite large doses for quite a long time, but that's not necessarily optimized treatment. In fact, an argument could be made, and I've made it before, and I guess I'll make it right now again, is that while the safety window of cannabis is really large, the window is really big, the therapeutic window is quite narrow. It
Mm-hmm.
A few 2.5 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams for most novice new people in cannabis, and it moves up a little
Yeah.
bit, but it stays pretty narrow. And if you go over it, right, if you go past that dosage, what often ends up happening is side effects. All the things we already talked about: anxiety,
Yeah.
paranoia, sleepiness, dry mouth, dry eyes. And so it's really about threading the needle. So I would say that microdosing cannabinoids, particularly when it comes to THC, is actually quite wise. CBD, on the other hand, there's some speculation it's not as well absorbed. It's certainly not as potent. It's not
Mm-hmm.
drawn to the same things in the body as THC. So a microdose of CBD might help some people. And we need to start at a low microdose for most people. But oftentimes people end up requiring a little bit more CBD just because of the way it works pharmacologically.
Are they doctors though prescribing now CBD and THC? Not in Europe for sure, but in America.
Yeah, well, again, they are dronabinol, marinol, and there's
Got it.
another drug on the market called Epidiolex, which is a plant-derived CBD grown in the UK for GW or
Okay.
Jazz Pharmaceuticals. They are prescribing it. And of note, to sort of circle back to what I just mentioned about larger doses, they're prescribing it for specific seizure conditions: Lennox-Gastaut, um, Dravet syndrome, as well as tubular
But isn't there any
sclerosis,
side
three
effects you think,
complex
or?
pediatric neurological conditions. And they have to give 10 to 20 milligrams per kilogram per day is the typical range that these children get. So let's imagine an adult, right? And an average adult in the UK or the US or Mexico would probably be around 100 kilos. That's a little higher, but if they're American, probably. So 100 kilos would put that person at taking 2,000 milligrams of CBD a day to manage their seizures. Now, that's not common. That was a big
Mm-hmm.
person. I do kids, but it's a large dose. By mass, that is the equivalent dose that we're giving kids. So it's the
Yeah.
evidence so far for a lot of conditions, whether it's stage fright, which actually CBD has been tested in stage fright and found to be relatively effective, but
Yeah.
they took 400 or 600 milligrams, right? Still quite a large dose to get that effect.
So how is that taken? Are we talking about pills, creams, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's in this case, I believe that was a like an oral solution or an oral capsule. It's a large dose, but not insane. You
Got it.
can make concentrated cannabis, for example, like dabbable concentrates or Rick Simpson oil, if you're familiar with that. Those can be between
Mm-hmm.
60% and 90% cannabinoids, and so
Got it.
it's not that much product when you think about it in that way. That would just be a
Mm-hmm.
single gram um, of product, but it wouldn't be economical Like it just doesn't make sense in Europe, that with the restrictions on less than 0.2% in the final product.
And how do you keep yourself updated? How do you know everything what is coming up? What does it work? What doesn't work? Is it studies being made? Is it do we have the data there to prove all of this?
Yeah, it's a lot. There is a ton of cannabis research being published. There's even more search engine optimized content being published, kind of fighting for the rank because the CBD fever and other cannabinoids, and everybody's looking for the clicks. So a few things. Number one, the Canigma.com, which is, I'm the chief science officer of the Canigma. We help answer people's questions on Google about weed, right? So exactly that. What's cool about the Canigma is we've WebMD'd weed. So we took the WebMD model, which was like to have an expert reviewer, and we did that for cannabis. So now a pharmacist reviews the healthcare articles, a plant biologist reviews the cannabis growing articles, a geneticist reviews this, that, and the other. So putting it all together with expert review is what we do. So cannigma.com. And if there's anybody else in Europe listening, we have a Spanish and a German site as well, although it is not as robust as our English site. In addition to that, PubMed. PubMed is a US government-based website that kind of conglomerates all of the literature that's being published in peer-reviewed journals. You can go to PubMed and search your terms, whatever you want, and look for a review article and look for a relevant article and go read it. It's a little intimidating at first, but especially with these new AI models and things of that nature, if there's anything you don't understand, ask a robot to tell you what it means and keep going, and you'll learn. You'll start to understand those concepts and theories. So if you really want to get into it, I honestly think reading what's being published now and new is the best way, because it's changing so quickly, because our knowledge is expanding so fast. That's the best place to understand and capture new information. Other than that, I'm on LinkedIn. A lot of people aren't on LinkedIn, but I'll tell you, a lot of cannabis business gets done on LinkedIn.
Oh, really?
Definitely. Cannabis
Oh, wow.
and other adjacent industries. There's a lot of activity on that website for sure.
How do you see the future with cannabinoids? How do you see?
Oh, friend. Okay. With the change in acceptance, we're going to see increased use among the world population. Cannabis is not without side effects. I would expect us to find a couple bumps along the road and increases in conditions like, a cannabis addiction, or worse, like a cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. So I think that could happen. But also, we're going to see an overwhelming acceptance. There will no longer be dope, and it'll have some bumps along the way, but overall, this is far safer and better for people than alcohol, and the world exists running on alcohol, so I suspect no major issues. I would point out, like, I'm doing research on rare but increasingly common side effect from a lot of cannabis consumption called cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, that's characterized by kind of cycles of intense nausea and vomiting if you smoke a lot of dope, marijuana, over a long period of time. And so I'm doing some research in that. So I'm focused on it. It's still rare. I don't foresee it being like a changing problem, but I want to acknowledge that, cannabis is not perfect, especially THC. Okay. Then I see a blossoming like natural products and wellness space. Like there's a lot of interest in the next molecule that can help you focus, it can help you sleep, that can help you eat less. And there's a lot of interest in cannabinoids in that space. CBD, sure, but also THCV, CBG, CBN, very promising, that people are going to try to niche down and figure out how to help themselves for their condition with a cannabinoid, kind of what you're proposing with CBD. So I think that's going to continue to grow, but it is a tight market. And then pharmaceutical companies are going to come in and try to find a way to get some sort of provisional patent on the process, patent on something they did special, and they will bring more cannabinoids to the market, but that's 10-15 years in the United States away, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, yeah, I think so, yeah. Because first of all, we haven't gotten Schedule 3 yet, even. Right? It hasn't even passed. Then, whenever it happens, most companies will be able to go to stage 2 trials, probably. And so that's, kind of a year. And then you go to stage 3, that's kind of a couple years. I think when it's all said and done, you're talking about 7 to 10 years, yeah, to get the first product in the United States.
Wow. Wow. Well, any advice for us women in menopause?
Oh my God. Yeah, again, start low and go slow. If you have access to THC, THC has plenty of therapeutic utility, but not everyone does. Not everyone wants to try. Not everyone can tolerate it. Okay, so CBD alone is a fine place to start. Know that starting low and kind of going slow every 3 to 5 days, maybe change your dose. It's not going to feel like THC, right? You kind of know THC is working. If you whether you take it orally or you smoke it, you still feel it. CBD, it's a much more nuanced effect. Some individuals report feeling better. Other individuals say they feel nothing. And so give it some time, titrate up slowly, and see where it can help. Specifically helping women with menopause, it's going to depend on the way you're consuming the cannabinoids. But CBD has anti-inflammatory actions, and we know as the
Yeah.
body starts to change, estrogen levels start to drop. Estrogen is like the woman's shield. It's like being produced to protect her and the eggs until we get to this stage of life. And then the shield sort of comes down and we're more susceptible, and the brain starts to change, and so the body starts to change. And so trying to use cannabinoids to help can be useful. Whether we're talking about menopausal, when it comes to sex and related relationships, a lot of women are using, infused oils, or potentially suppositories, not necessarily in that case. That can be helpful. Or some women are using the suppositories on the days they're not having sex to try to just keep things
Mhm.
healthy. There's oral products that can be used for more systemic problems. You could give it a go for your hot flashes, although there's not a lot of evidence there. And women report benefits with sleep with oral CBD products. They report fewer aches and pains in those muscles that, again, are starting to change because the hormones are changing. And then, when it comes to hot flashes, a lot of women report THC is beneficial, even smoking cannabis if they're experienced enough to do that safely. Just a little bit of THC might be able to change that thermoregulatory system just a little and benefit them. The evidence is not quite there on CBD and hot flashes yet, although there are people looking in that direction. Um, People are hopeful that there can be a benefit. And even if it's not the cannabinoids I mentioned, there's still a lot more. And it's just wonderful that we can use a plant, leverage something that we know is non-toxic and pretty well tolerated to try and help ourselves. Will it replace all of your other medicines? No. But if you're doing other things and cannabis can help you feel, that 20% better, that can mean so much. Whether it's your mood, which certainly women report feeling benefits from taking CBD and hemp products for their mood, or whether it's your sex life. There's just a lot it can help with a little, and if those things
Mhm.
start to add up.
Now, listen, thanks for being here with us. I think I'll have to rewatch this again and digest all the information you gave to me. And I am so blessed that you took the time to speak to us and educate us, because that's what we need in Europe right now. I don't think we have enough people talking about what you did and what I think when I post this, so many people have so many questions. Where can they reach you? You said on LinkedIn, they can reach you on LinkedIn.
Definitely LinkedIn. If you are interested in the science that I'm talking about and you want to follow along, that's great. But I'm also on Instagram, Cannabis PharmD. I have the website, canigma.com. My email is cody@canigma.com. Any of those will work. I'm quite responsive. Give me a little bit of grace on the response time.
Well, we love you. Thank you for tuning us with us today and teaching us all about cannabis. And for everyone watching this, be sure to join us again. New episode will be released next week, and make sure you follow our cannabis guru. And thank you for being here.